right, Sabina. So I've been wanting to talk to you about this, and I finished it on the weekend. So this is the book that I've just finished reading called Set the Tone. Nothing Can Change Until You Do by Sabina Jackson, who is my dear friend. And thank you. I feel like I've been part of this journey because we've been talking about you writing this book for a couple of years, and then to see it, read it, it was just awesome.
Great. Love that.
And I
love it. It's been a long journey and you have been there, and thank you for your support.
Oh, my pleasure. And I have to say, I loved it. Not even thinking that, yes, I know the author, but it was just the work. Obviously, we share common. We're both kinesiologists, and we both practice in a similar, I guess, philosophy.
Yeah.
And it just really touched me. I just thought this book, not only did it help myself, and I am your ideal client, I guess.
Yeah, you are the person I was speaking to.
Yeah. And I felt it. And the thing is that the clients I work with, they're me as well.
Yeah.
They're the ideal client. And I just wanted to start, we'll start at the beginning. And in the very beginning, when you share a little bit about your story, and I've I hadn't heard it like that before, and I hadn't read it like that, but just that intimate window into someone's life. And after speaking to so many people over the years, it's just there's always a time in someone's life where they remember when there was a shift. And it's not, and as you say in the book, it's not like the next day everything changed, but there was a shift somewhere in your mindset, in your inner guidance, or something shifted to say, I don't want to live like this anymore.
Yeah, there's a couple of pivotal moments throughout that I kind of talk about throughout the book. The introduction, really, I wanted it to be, like you say, an insight into the me now.
Yeah.
Remembering a time from before.
Yeah.
And really tapping into that pain. And then I suppose feeling the relief and the just the magnitude of how far I've come from that moment in time. And so it was me now kind of looking back on that moment and saying, okay, let me share with you how I got from there to here.
Yep. And then it's that hero's journey where it starts, that call to action, I guess, as Joseph Campbell talks about it. But that I loved at the end of that where it talks about your future self. You're looking back and giving. Is this the right way how to say it? Because I know you put it in the book where you actually said insert name here.
Yeah.
And how, like, in those times of just complete stress in the dark night of the soul, and we just wish someone give me guidance, to actually realize it's going to be yourself.
Yeah, I suppose there is this potential that always exists. There is your higher self. Yeah. There is a future you, and between you now and that future you is potential. There's all this potential, right? And we always think it's going to get filled from outside.
Yes.
And it really gets filled by what we allow to come into our now. It's almost like, okay, we've got all this knowing, we've got all this insight that some expanded part of us has. How much of that are we going to let into the now? And so it was also me remembering and sharing with you, with the reader, that yes, I wanted everything to be different at that point in time, but really I wanted to be saved. That was really the crux of it, was I wanted to be swept up and saved. And even though I was constantly asking for help, yearning for everything to be different, I wasn't really open to being different myself. I just wanted everything on the outside to change. I wanted people to get how they were hurting me. I wanted things to fall into place. I wanted everything to be the way I wanted it to be, without actually realizing or being open to me being different in any of those scenarios.
Yeah, I think that's key to know that yeah, like I will sit in the front line, nothing can change until you do.
Yeah.
Like, and knowing that, and as you go through the book, all that becomes much more clear that I don't want to say like we created it, but the person we were got us to that point.
Yeah.
So the person, and that insight into the future self is knowing that there is that aspect of you, that inner guide, that higher self, that aspect of you that actually created change, and to know that there's a glimpse that it's possible.
Yes.
Like in that time of just feeling that desperation, to actually think, I can do this.
Yeah.
And an aspect of myself has already done it. Like, to be saved would be to know how the story was going to end, or knowing that you're going to be all right.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's like to know that.
And I hope I convey that, because I would want people to know that you are going to be all right.
Yeah, because I saw it in two parts. One, that like it is that part where you surrender.
Yeah.
And you surrender to a power greater than yourself.
Yeah.
And I guess to look at that as power greater than yourself in that moment, and then opening up to guidance of, like, I love the future self scenario, because that is you are the hero of your journey.
Yeah. Yeah, you are.
Yeah, you are the hero. And so that's the introduction, but I just loved it, because as soon as I finished reading that, I wanted more, and I already felt part of the story, and I could remember my story, and I'm sure that the reader, they'll be able to go into their story, their pain, and remember that, and feel that reassurance that, yeah, it's going to be all right, and there is an aspect of me that I can tap into, and the book is the guide to get to know that aspect of yourself.
Yeah.
And how to distinguish, and as we'll get into that, how to distinguish, like in the next chapter, I think you do go into the description of ego and right mind. Yeah. And that's sort of, I think, the key aspect is ego and right mind. That's a key throughout the book. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Well, so right mind is a term that I have borrowed from A Course in Miracles, which was a body of work that completely and utterly changed my life, saved my life. It is not, I'm not being dramatic when I say saved it. It definitely did save it. So I draw on it a lot in this book, and just in my life in general. And I mean, I had read about ego from many different perspectives, from many different teachers, and what it's a term that often, like, it has a bad rap. The term ego has a bad rap. You use it with some people and you turn them off immediately. I actually had somebody once say to me, I'd love my husband to do some work with you, but you're not going to be able to use the word ego. He's just not going to be open to that. And what I find really interesting,
I think men are more temperamental about ego than women. I think that's how I found that also.
Well, so I needed to start really early on in the book and say, so when I'm talking about ego, I'm not necessarily talking about the way that mainstream have sold that term to us. I'm really talking about the aspect of our mind, the aspect that comes with being human, that is the least evolved. The part of our mind that is just really focused on survival.
Yeah.
And it has kind of been given this the job of keeping us alive and keeping us safe. And most of us, that is the part of our mind that we think is us. Oh, I did. It's the very critical, it's the very judgmental, it's the very basic, it's the part that's the least evolved in each one of our minds. And because it's in our voice, we hear it speaking to us throughout our lives, we think it's us.
It's like the loudest voice in the room.
The loudest voice in the room. And if the loudest voice in the room is giving me messages of, you're not good enough, you're not thin enough, you're not this enough, you're not that enough, this constant messaging of not enough, this very critical voice, this very critical messaging. And I think that's me. When we think that's us, that's where the pain comes from. It is this pain of like, well, how on earth do I, and we start to think we have to be different to what we are, which is we're looking on the outside all the time for like, well, how can I feel better about this? Because I can't feel better on the inside, because on the inside there's this messaging and this voice that's very critical. There's a lot of pain. And so realizing that that is actually only a very small aspect of us. And if I learn to distinguish it from myself, and also learn to access the right mind, which is then the higher aspect that we have, this connected, guided self that we have access to. If I can shift from one to the other, then I can actually make this whole inner world a completely different place.
Because that was the other thing I wrote down. So the sort of a key things in the book are the description of ego and right mind, to understand that, so you can distinguish between both of them, which is key to living a conscious life. And then also, as you spoke about, then the inner and outer world.
Yes.
And
so I spent all the time, and I think would be in pretty good company there, looking to the outside to be the way I wanted it to be. Looking for the partner in the relationship to be more loving, to be more supportive, to be more open, to hearing me, to respecting my emotions, to looking to, the job, career aspects to be that nothing sort of felt the way I wanted it to feel. Nothing was the way I wanted it to be. And it doesn't have to be that dramatic, where nothing is really the way you want it to be, for life to feel not fabulous.
It's like, even when there is that time, and I think you talk about it later on in the book, but there is that time with separation, that even when things do look like you thought they should look, and you still feel
there's something's missing.
Wrong. Something's missing.
Yeah.
If you feel it's like, why aren't I happy?
Yes. Or we're happy for a little while. We change an aspect of our lives. So you get into the new relationship and then you think, this is fabulous. This is how it always should have been. This is wonderful. And then you start to see kind of that, the patterns return, the way we feel returns. We settle back into being us, in a sense. And really without recognizing that. So I was trying to have the life I wanted without really changing any aspect of myself. And if I would have said that to myself back at that time, I would have just been exhausted by that whole statement, because I would have thought, well, I already feel pretty crap about myself. I'm already really unhappy. And now you're saying I'm the one that has to change. Where I already feel like I'm the most conscious person in most of the relationships I have. I already feel like I'm the one that's not getting what I need and want. How on earth can I be the one that needs to change? And so it was then, the first aspect of setting the tone really was that recognition that, okay, I actually have to focus on my relationship with me.
Yep.
And what I don't, which was one of the other realizations, that, that time when I was having that conversation with my ex-partner, and I felt like he wasn't hearing me at all. And I kind of like had this moment where it just was so clear to me that I'd never heard myself.
Yeah. So that's when is that the part in the book where you go into the family patterns and programs and where we ask ourselves, what are we not getting?
What am I not giving myself?
And how am I not giving that to myself?
Yeah. The family patterns comes a little bit later on, but it's when you encounter something and you recognize something here is missing. So whether that's respect, whether that's regard, whether it's love, whether it's whatever feels is missing in any situation. And this lends very heavily from A Course in Miracles. It's I think pretty sure one of the lessons in A Course in Miracles is the only thing that can be missing is what I don't provide myself.
Yes, I remember you make a quote to that. You talk about that one. And that's huge, because when do we ever think? We don't think about ourselves. Are we always judging ourselves by the outside, how people perceive us, what we have in our life, who we have in our life? And yeah, I think
and that's where the power part comes in, you know, really, really looking at where am I giving my power away?
yeah.
And I was hemorrhaging power. I've always, well, this is the irony, because I felt like I was insightful. I felt like I knew a lot because I read all the stuff, and I knew the stuff. If you had a conversation with me, I would have said, well, I know that.
Yeah.
I know that. I did a lot of knowing that, but I did very little of doing that because I was still waiting.
Well, that's a difference, isn't it? It's like, because we do, I mean, I find myself say that sometimes, and my husband is always, he's like, he always sort of picks it up when I go, I know that. I know that. Because, yes, but are you doing it?
Yes. And we're not doing it usually because we forget where our power is. And this is what ego does. It focuses on the outside all the time. It's outward looking, it's outward focused, it's what people are doing to us. The ego is our victim mind. We're in our victim mind when we're in ego. And so we spend our days thinking about who's not giving us what we want and who's doing what to us. And we spend so much of our lives focusing on trying to figure out other people, forgetting that, and this is the book, is a remembering that our power is not ever something we can lose. It is certainly something we can give away, and then we can wait for that person to hand it back to us. You know, we're kind of in constant kind of like interactions with situations and with people and with whatever, even with our own mind, of handing our power over and waiting for someone to hand it back.
And waiting for something to come back to us so we feel better. Like I think it's the next chapter where you talk about, if you imagine your power is like a basket, and you're giving it out during the day from the moment you wake up, and feeling exhausted. Like that's a good way to sort of even understand where it is you're giving your power. If you feel spent, exhausted, where am I focusing on? And and like you said, on the outside world, always on the outside world.
Where am I depleted? Okay, I'm depleted because basically I'm giving very little to myself. And not in a, you know, have a bath and light some candles kind of way, although great, but more in a like, am I an ally to myself? Am I supporting myself, or am I constantly beating myself up, down on myself? You know, because a lot of people, if you sat most people down and said, are you a good, kind, generous, loving, supportive person? They would say, yes.
Yeah.
Of course I am. And they could give you all these examples where they are that. But are you that to yourself? Well, no. And I was waiting to be treated much better by other people than I ever treated myself.
Yeah. And that's a big one, especially for women, I think, because it just seems to be more.
I think both. I think it's just how it presents itself is different between men and women, but I think both, really.
Yeah, I guess the different, and this goes into the outside world and creating these ideas and identities of this is how I should be.
Yeah.
And we have those ideas, this is how I should be as a mother, a friend, a daughter, how I should be as a nurse or someone in my job. This is how I'm perceived.
Yeah.
And the man is the same. The masculine is the same. And where power goes to that is, you know.
Yes, I think the difference between men and women would be where their power is going to might look a bit different. And where they get their sense of self back looks a bit different. You know, from my work with clients sort of in the last 11 years, what I have really seen is that women get their sense of self very often from the health of their relationships. So, you know, are my children happy? How good are my friendships? How you know, the health of a relationship with their partner, and that's where we get our sense of self from.
Yeah.
Men get their sense of self from how well they can provide for the people that they love, for the people in their lives. And so that can often set up, I mean, could be a whole other book, because that can often set up where...
Maybe it should be another book.
Well, although there is the example in the book of, I mean, I won't say too much about it because you might want to go into that a bit more, but, you know, where the past starts to just determine what we say to ourselves about the present, because ego has been programmed by what it has seen. And so, you know, you can have that partner that thinks, well, because my husband is not, or my partner, my whatever, is not home much, it means he doesn't want to be with me. Whereas he's busily, you know, providing.
Yeah, I know that is later on in the book, but I think because we're talking about it now, we can just go there. I've actually had that with, I've seen that with clients, that it is that there's two things, and it is a good way to look at it, to see it from two perspectives. One, you know, and we are just drawing from our past, which is the ego. All it has is how you describe it, is like with past experience, what it's been taught, and then we go into families and...
Well, so if you're having that moment where you think, whether it's an epiphany, whether it's one sort of really powerful moment in time, or whether it's just you're at the end of your tether after, you know, a collective, you know, it could be decades of feeling like, I want things to be different. The recognition, well, nothing can change until I do. But then, of course, your next question is, well, how do I change then? And so that's where ego really is pivotal and vital to recognize, because the ego aspect of our mind is the part that gets programmed by what it has seen. Because in its quest to keep us safe, you know, and safe doesn't just mean not be run over by a car. Safe means not ridiculed, not rejected, not, you know, all the things that we fear in relationships in our lives.
And would you say that ego is like, it's because it's only going by what has it's seen, and then I love your metaphor where you talk about the filing cabinets.
Yeah.
And we're going through the filing cabinets of our past, our parents, you know, we've got the generational aspect. And now I've forgotten what I was going to say.
Well, if you think about, okay, think about the fact somebody's come down to you and said, okay, it's your job to keep this person safe. Well, how are you going to do that? You're going to go, okay, let me find out as much as I possibly can about how to keep this person safe.
So it's about things that are familiar are safe?
It's just about gathering information. So this is where there are practical aspects all the way through the book. But one of the biggest parts is the sitting down and remembering, thinking about what you saw as a child. So that it's not about rehashing trauma, but it's about, what did your mum and dad teach you, model to you, say about what it is to be a man in the world, what it is to be a woman in the world, what relationship, what love is, what did they say about money, what did they say about...
And I've done that exercise of yours, like I think we did when we did the walk a couple of years ago. That was part, we did the exercise, and that was so helpful to look at that, and really that old saying of know thyself. Of all these things that come in to create the being, to know it thyself, and then to be the observer and look at things like you're a detective.
And to shift to that wiser part of you that has a completely different perspective of the whole thing. Because whilst we're in ego thinking that's us, we're really in triggers, we're in patterns, we're in things that if you sat us down and said, do you want to live your life exactly how your parents lived it, we mostly would say no. And that's not even necessarily an insult to the families that we come from. It's just that as the next generation, that's how we evolve. We've looked and we have decided, actually, I'd like to do that differently. I'd like to be healthier in that respect, whatever it is in each family. So then how come so many of our lives just end up looking the same? How come we have this desire to have better relationships than our parents, or, you know, be different parents, whatever? how come we have a desire to be different to how we were a decade ago, and yet eventually we fall into a pattern and it all feels and looks the same, and we start doing things that have this kind of like pattern to them. So how do you break the pattern? Well, by accessing the part of you that observed that pattern in the parents, in the home, in growing up.
So that's the ego?
And got its information from that, which is what gets stored in your filing cabinet. So I just say, so imagine that, ego's been sitting there busily writing down, what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be in relationships? What does marriage mean? What does a career mean? What do children, what does mothering mean? What does fathering mean? And it looked to the people that modeled that, and it stored it all away in our subconscious. And now we're busily trying to create a different life with this old filing system that gets triggered every time ego, because ego is like the guide. It's almost like walking ahead of you into any new scenario. And new scenarios are fabulous because new situations give us an opportunity to choose differently. I mean, any situation gives us an opportunity.
And to grow. And that's often when we get triggered in new situations.
It's often when at the start everything looks great. You're in a new job, it's a whole new environment, and you're like, this is brilliant. I love these people. These people are so different to the people I worked with in my last job. This is really good. I'm completely I'm confident. This is wonderful. And then something happens and ego goes, I know what this means. I remember this. We've experienced this before. And it presses play on the reaction. And before you know it, you've been taken over and you're reacting from an old pattern because ego's busily telling you, I know what this means, and this means this. And yet that is where I talk about the power of the pause. That is the time when we actually have the opportunity to go, no, hang on. You don't decide what this means. I'm going to decide what this means. And if anything in my life is going to be different, it has to mean something different. Because if I'm just going to go through all of my days with ego going, I'll lead the way and I'll tell you what's safe and what's not and where you're going to get hurt and where you're not, nothing can change.
And that is living outside of yourself. You're just reacting to everything and letting it trigger you, and you're not. So when I think in the power of the pause, or I could have skipped something, but when you start talking about wisdom, love and fear. So same kind of thing with the choice. And I know Course in Miracles talks about love and fear, that there's two choices. And I really love that when you start talking about the difference, so that's when we start accessing our right mind, when we start moving into wisdom and not reaction and getting into fear or getting triggered. Wisdom is, would you say wisdom is the observer of looking at things?
No, wisdom can be just as active as any other aspect of our mind. It's really just where we could think of an observer could be ourselves, because if we think on the one hand, or if we imagine that on the one hand, okay, there's this ego, call it something different if that word doesn't suit you. Just think of it as there is this aspect of our mind that's very limited. It's very unevolved. It's very frightened. It's full of fear and doubt. And it just spends all of its day thinking, I don't want to be ridiculed. I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to be abandoned. I don't want to be frightened. I just want everything just to be I don't like change. I don't like expanding. I don't like evolving. Can't we just stay safe?
And then expansion and evolving is what we're here for.
Expansion and evolving is the realm of our wiser self, right? So that's the part of us that's going, oh my God, like let's explore, let's experience something different. That's the part of us that's dreaming about, really we were much more tapped into that when we were children, and we people would say, what do you want to be? And I want to do this and this, and we could really
I want to be an astronaut. I'm going to be a scientist, and
any of that, just dream big and just have no concept of it not coming true. So if I can be in that part of myself, if I can be frightened and yet at other times I can be really excited about expanding, then there must be a me that's separate from both of those things.
I love that. I love that explanation, because I can see myself And I can see others where we get into that space of being really excited and then you go into fear. Yes. And knowing that they are separate.
And then knowing that you've chosen that because you've turned to that side of you. You know, ego won. Yeah. Ego put a good case forward and you've gone, okay, I'm going to go with you.
That time. It won that time.
Yes. Yes. And ego can only ever advise us based on the past. And we think, so ego might speak to us, and I know that it's just a matter of practice of recognizing when it is ego that we're listening to, because of course it's our voice. It doesn't come with a little tag saying this message is sponsored by ego. It just comes in your voice and it says, don't do that. And then you think, okay, is that intuition or is that fear?
And that's a good one. I think that's a good one to actually, how do we identify? I know how I choose to, but that's taken a long time to even go in and say, is this growth and is this my intuition telling me to be careful, or is this because I'm fear, because it's something different and this is really growth and expansion? How do we tell the difference?
Well, I think it's important to start the answering of that by saying you don't necessarily choose a different action, but you stop when you're in that realm of like, hang on, is this fear or is this intuition? Just pause, breathe, and feel into the feeling of it more. Is this coming from fear, or is this coming from a loving place and more expanded place? So let's say you get offered a job and you think, no, I don't want to take that. Okay, all right, just stop. Why do I not want to take that? Because I won't know what I'm doing, and I don't. It's too advanced. I haven't got the skills. Okay, well, you know that's fear talking to you. If you stop and you say, okay, hang on, why don't I want to take this job? Because it's way too many hours and I don't want to be that involved in a job right now. There are other things that are more important to me right now. Okay, well, that's a wiser, that's an insightful, that's your intuition saying, no, not for you right now. So with both situations, you will say no to the job. But why are you saying no? And that's where
shifts everything. Shifts
everything, because you're no longer making decisions based on fear. You're no longer making decisions based on staying small. You're making decisions that are best for you.
Yeah.
And the outcome might be the same, but the reason why you've chosen it is very different.
And when you make that choice, you won't feel sort of contracted or still in fear. You feel like a relief or a breath, like wow, or excitement if it's something that you are moving into
that you're saying yes to.
Different.
Exactly. Because you're not going against yourself. You're actually supporting yourself.
That's beautiful. I like that. I like that a lot. And what was I'm just looking at my notes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking with no, we've talked about that. I think I was looking at about judgment. Page 39, there was about trusting your judgment, which is what we just talked about, trusting your judgment and creating something different and knowing that it won't be worse. So we spoke on that. And then I wrote and I see this a lot, when you ask people, when we're going into a place of creating, when we're going into a place of wanting to choose something different, when you ask someone what they want and they only tell you what they don't want, because they're always focused on the unpleasant circumstance or what they want to run away from, instead of actually moving into the expansive mind, which I would think is the right mind of what do I want to create? How do I want to feel? They're just always from that space of what's not working for me, or I don't want that, or I want to leave this job because I don't like the people. But you haven't thought about where I'm moving to create something different. How would you look at that?
Well, and that is an aspect to my work and to the book that can be a little bit controversial to some people that are used to this kind of book, because I actually
That's what I like about it.
Yeah, I encourage people not to get too focused on the detail. So the starting scenario that I talk about in the book, where I just wanted everything to be different. If you would have said to me, well, what do you want? I had no idea. I just wanted the pain to stop. I wanted to feel better. That's all I knew. Now, if you would have said to me, right, let's vision board, let's this, I would have said, well, I really don't know. And what I've learned in the meantime, between then and now, is that manifesting in the way that we've been taught it in the very mainstream kind of conversations that we say about it, to me is very much the realm of ego. Because ego loves details. Ego wants to know what's going to happen, when is it going to happen, who's going to be there, what are they going to say?
Control freak.
Control freak. Ego is our inner control freak, because how can I keep you safe if I don't know this party where we're going, who's going to be there? Who's going to be there? What are they going to say to me? What are they going to ask? What will they want to know? What's everybody going to be wearing? Am I going to fit in? All this sort of stuff that ego, now we don't all have those fears, but some variation of it we will. And for someone it'll be a party, and for someone else it'll be a new workplace, or it'll be a course they want to do, or it'll be whatever it is, right? Ego wants to know so that it can make sure I need to know what this means. And the more information I have ahead of time, the more I can control it. So when I started studying kinesiology, and we were taught SMART goals.
Yep.
I don't even really remember exactly. It's simple, measurable.
Okay, but I know you had to put a time.
Lots of detail.
Yeah.
When, what, how, why, when is it going to come? What is it going to look like? And what I have realized over the last however many, probably I would say what I've realized over my whole adult life, is that the more tightly I tried to be in control of what something was going to look like, the more likely I was to miss the actual opportunities that came my way.
Or do you feel like that when we focused on the how, the more resistance comes up to allowing something to come in? You know,
not just that, the more that it can only be more of the same, more of the past, not just more of the same. Sure, I can sit here and I can say, I want to make $1 million by next year. But there will be a whole part of me that'll say, well, how are you going to do that? Well, then I have to figure out the how. It's that deep, and all of that kind of past stuff will come in, all of that past programming and that ego stuff will come in. Whereas I like to focus on allowing. And for me, so how do I create something different when I'm in pain now? I focus on one aspect that I want. So let's say, I mean, in the book I talk about, you know, say if your health isn't great right now and you want better health, then have that be your focus. What is your value? What is your priority? Health. Yeah. Health is my focus. Health is my priority. So then I'm going to start making decisions and choices that bring me more of that and not less of that.
Yes.
And so rather than getting a vision board with people, all healthy people on it, great, you want to do that, do that. I am not bagging the vision board. I'm just saying for me to move out of that.
But sometimes that affirms the negative state of being.
It can, because then
you're looking saying, at that, you're going, well, I don't have that.
I don't have that.
Yes. I'm not enough. I'm not well enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm not, you know, whatever, thin enough.
Whatever enough, all the
whatever enough.
And anytime we start talking like that, I can guarantee you coming from your ego, because the ego is the part of us that feels it's not enough. That is not actually how we feel about ourselves. So
that's the remembering.
Yeah, it's the remembering of who you are. And the allowing something. I talk about how the house I live in now, how I never would have been able to manifest it because it had so many aspects to it that I didn't even know existed. I didn't know I could live like this. I did not know I could live like this. And I can tell you I did not manifest this house because I did not know it existed. I did not know that it was in my price range. I did not know that I could live like this. But what I focused on was 3 sort of key things. And then I just allowed perfection to unfold. And so what I love about that style is that you don't need to know what you want. You just focus on what I want more of, and you keep moving to it,
what I want more of, and how does that make me feel? Like, how do I want to feel? It brought up a memory of mine, and it was when you used to have the spiritual book club, and that's when I first met you.
Yeah.
And you remember a conversation, and I remember having a conversation. I brought it up, and I think we were doing Abraham Hicks' Law of Attraction, and I was thinking, because at the time, I was coming out of a marriage and getting divorced, and I was thinking, how can I create a relationship that I want when I've never had it, when I've never seen it?
Yeah.
And now, in hindsight, looking back at that, I didn't know what I wanted.
Yeah.
I didn't have a clue, and I did create that. I did create a perfect wonderful relationship, exactly what my soul wanted. Now I totally understand what that's about. It was, if you told me to write it down, it probably wouldn't have looked like that at all. And I remember the conundrum at the time, reading this, and I went, well, if I'm going to be specific about what I want, I don't know what I want because I've never seen it. I don't know what it looks like. How can I imagine it, feel it, if I don't know? But also, and I think but I did surrender, give it away, allow. I wasn't thinking about it a lot, and it did show up.
Yes. And the other thing is, so you've got people who are saying, I really want to be a mother, and they're saying no to partners with children. Or I really want to be, I really want to have this in my life, and then it comes in a way they didn't expect it to come. I want more money, but it shows up as an opportunity, or it shows up as a saving, or it shows up as as an actual gift through somebody. No, but it didn't. It wasn't cash. It wasn't numbers in a bank account. And so therefore, and this is how that the realm of ego works. It's
the saying that just came to my mind then is the devil is in the detail, because I think it is. Like, if you get wrapped up in the detail, you lose the chance of actually creating something that could be more expansive for you.
And you know what that's
that
like?
You didn't know.
Do you know that you will know it? Everyone will know it. That sort of story about the man who's in a flood and he's sitting on top of his house.
Yes.
And he has the I think first the boat comes past and says, hop in, and he says, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. And then the helicopter sort of lowers down, like a winch thing, and says, come on, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. And there's one other thing occurs, and he says, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. And then when he dies, and then he says to God, why didn't you save me? And God says, I sent you a boat, I sent you a helicopter, I sent you whatever, and you didn't recognize it. I mean, that is what happens when we hand that over to ego. It's like, no, I'm waiting for this thing, and it's not looking like that. So if it's not looking like that,
and we can see so many people that do that. They're so specific and lists, and it has to be this way, and miss the opportunity of that growth and expansion in our life.
And miss the opportunity of,
and maybe miss the idea of actually what is it meant to be a creator,
to be co-creating, to be what does it mean to be in communion with my higher self, with my source, with my God, whatever it is that you want to say, and fully utilize this life so that I can expand and evolve into my higher self right here, right now, without this smaller part of myself going, no, that's not what it's going to look like. No, that's not what it means to be a success. No, that's not what relationships look like.
Because do you think that is like, that's looking on the outside again? That's looking at what has been dictated through media, through family, through culture, whatever. This is what this looks like. So this is what you must aspire to, rather than tapping into, what do I truly desire? What do I want? That's when the separation happens, with feeling unhappy, even though you've created everything everyone said you wanted, needed, should have.
Well, that's the lolly aisle sort of scenario.
I love that metaphor. I love that metaphor. So talk about that metaphor, because
I sort of use this metaphor of this, of, you know, being a young kid and for the first time ever being able to go to the shop all by yourself. And your mum says, and, you know, your mum needs something from the shop and you say, can I go? Can I go? And she says, okay. And you know what you need to get and you head off to the supermarket all by yourself, and you walk in and the doors open and it's bright and there's lots of noise and there's people and you're overawed, and you start to walk through the supermarket aisles and you get to the lolly aisle and you just lose your mind, right? And all the different smells and the colors of the wrappers and all the stuff you love, and you just spend so much time in that lolly aisle that you forget what you came to the actual supermarket for. And then you start, people, you know, after a while you remember, oh, I think there's something I'm here for. I don't think this is what I'm here for. And so you start to ask people, do you know what I'm here for? You know, and it's really, I mean, what it is, it's what we do when we come to this life experience. The material things can be fabulous and they're shiny and they smell good and they look good and we want to play with them and, you know, we want to like experience them. But if we get so too caught in that, we actually forget what we came here for. And then just like when you eat all the lollies in the lolly aisle and then you just have wrappers all around you, but you feel really sick and you feel really, you know, off. A lot of people are living their lives like that. They've got wrappers around them of all their toys, the better house, the better car, the better this, the better that. But what am I here for? And that's that missing part.
So they're looking outside, constantly, I want that, I want that, I want that. I'll find out what I want. And this is what I love about your metaphor. And I'm just going to ruin this, but the note from your mother in your pocket. You've had it all along. It's the Dorothy story all over again. You had it all along. You had a note. So if you just go within, you actually have the answers within. And that is, I love that metaphor because I see it, I use it. I mean, I'm going to use that metaphor from now on, but I understand that it is from within and that we have been just confused. I heard a thing today that in this life, instead of playing, it's like we're playing hide and seek, but it's like find, remember, lose and find. We've lost our who we were and we're trying to find it. We spend most of our life trying to find it or seeking. And if we don't on that journey of finding out who we are or trying to expand and grow, we do get in that place of stagnant. I think I wrote that down in one of your chapters. That's what it brought up to me, that, you know, if we're not growing, if we're not expanding, if we just keep doing this loop, it's like stagnant water and we're just not, we're not meant to be that way. That's why we find places of feeling so down.
Where it can get confusing is that ego has this desire for more. So ego is kind of shooting out this, because ego has this sense of not enough. So it feeds that to us and we have this sense of not enough, not enough, there's not enough, there's not enough. Okay, well, what's the antidote to not enough? More. So ego says, get more. But ego thinks that the lolly aisle is the ultimate. How many lollies can I have? How many toys can I have? How many houses can I have? How many cars? How many overseas trips? How many friends? How many clothes, shoes, whatever? All the more. How many good meals? How many bottles of wine? How much more can I get in my life? And there's this more, whilst at the same time, it's not really feeding that desire to be more.
Yes, that's perfect.
The higher self is saying that our right mind is saying we want to be more, but that actually means expanding.
And that's getting to know, and that's changing who you are, getting to know yourself. Like that's to shift to move into a new identity, or just remembering who you were, a creative expression or whatever it is, remembering who you are, which I just love that. I love that. And it just resonates with me when we actually are remembering. We're not trying to be more. We just need to bring ourselves back to remember
who we are. And it has very little to do with what we do. I think people can get caught in, what am I meant to do? What would be the thing to do? What's my purpose can get quite maddening. It can spin you round and round and round, because really a lot of the self-help spiritual industries, a lot of this is from ego to ego.
Yeah, what's
a
my
lot
purpose?
of this is from ego to ego. So it's about recognizing when your ego is being spoken to in the advertisements. You are not enough, you need this. You don't know enough, you need this. All of that stuff is speaking to your ego. But it's recognizing that it's not really so much what I do, it's how I do it, it's why I do it, it's am I expanding, it's am I expanding in the way I raise my children? Like, you don't even need to leave your home, really. You don't really need to leave your couch to, be very conscious in the way you live your life.
Yeah.
You can be conscious in the way you move through your house. You don't have to have the big, it's not so much about, because you can be quite unconscious. You can have the most evolved cleaner in a hospital, and you can have the most unevolved, unconscious head surgeon at the same time. It is not what you do. It is the are you expanding in your authenticity, in your connection, in who you are.
Yeah.
Are you bringing more and more of who you are to each and every situation that you encounter? It's not so much about the situation.
And then I think you go into that further in the book, but like when we do get to that place of knowing who we are, then when we are faced with looking for answers of things and looking for when questions come up or things come up, we can go within to feel into the truth of it, rather than always looking for answers and for other people to tell us what is true.
Well, you stop outsourcing for your sense of self. You stop outsourcing for your worth. You stop outsourcing for your self-worth, because you, in every situation and scenario you encounter, you're the one saying, I decide what this means. Yeah.
I decide what this means. I like decide. That.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to open up the book. There was more things in the back that I wanted to talk about, like to go in. So we go into when the critic becomes the guide. So this is when we identify our right mind, we identify our ego, we understand wisdom, we're choosing from love, and then now we're living consciously. And then this is what I say, like this is a guidebook to use. One, to learn how to identify, and then how do we choose, and then how do we use. Before we start, is like this, when you talk about the ego, there has been this thing in the personal development world that we just think, how do I get rid of my ego? How do I suppress it into submission? How do I beat it? How do I hate on it? And I want to talk a bit more about that, because I think that's really important, how do we live together? How do we exist together?
So yes, you're going to find different, the thing is, if this book doesn't resonate with you, great. Different works are going to resonate with different people. For me, the message that I can be a human in this form and not have an ego didn't really resonate with me, because to me it always seemed like, well, then what would I still be here for? What would be the point of this experience if I now recognized it completely and fully for the illusion that it is? And if I was so conscious and so in my power all the time that I could not be triggered, that, then what would be the point? You would be an enlightened master, and you would either be here to teach or you would leave. You would be in a different realm. So to me, I always thought, well, okay, now I know this ego. Now I'm becoming acquainted with my ego. What now? Do I beat it into submission? Well, that didn't feel right, because that to me felt like exactly what ego would want, because I would then be in this constant conflict with it, and it already was getting off on conflict anyway. So it was like hate on itself. You're hating on an aspect of yourself, really.
Yeah.
So then do I just pretend it's not there? And I think anything you suppress is going to come back and like tenfold.
It'll find a way.
It'll find a way.
It'll find
so
a way.
To me, it just feels the most powerful thing is to turn it into a guide. So that now when I'm triggered, I stop and I think, okay, what's here for me? What my ego has just yelled in my head and gone, who does she think she is? And what are the, okay, hang on. Let me actually turn to that part of myself and say, okay, what's really going on here? What aspect of my own experience have I just been reminded of? What pattern has just come back up for me to become conscious and aware of? And so the inner critic can really become not only a guide, but a part of the full guidance system that it is to be a human.
Yes.
So it can let you know whenever you've fallen asleep again. Oh, I was just unconscious there for a bit. And I talk about it, sort of being the greatest hypnotist that there is internally in our lives. Because it's like it's walking around, it's going, and sleep. And while you're asleep in the corner, or while I'm asleep in the corner, it's wreaking havoc in my life. It's telling people where to go. It's telling people what it's on social media going, how dare you? It's offended. It's annoyed. It's overwhelmed. It's a control freak. It's running havoc in my life while I'm, in a sense, asleep in the corner.
Yeah.
And then
you wake up when you're living consciously.
You wake up and you
wake up and you go, oh.
Okay, they're not my finest hour. But the thing is, you don't want to then use that against yourself. You don't want to use that to beat yourself up. You just want to go, okay, so what just went on there? And I think once you can look at anything that triggers you and really ask yourself, okay, what is this teaching me about me? What is here for me right now? And not spend my life trying to figure out other people like I used to, and not spend my life collecting quotes to hand other people because I thought you really need to know this, or books and say you really need to read this. I mean, I spent like most of my life like busily trying to wake people up. Okay, remembering my life is about me. Remembering that it's just, that I set the tone. Remembering that nothing can change until I do. Okay, what is here for me right now? What is this trigger teaching me? And where is my ego a guidance to me right now to show me that I've just been asleep to this? How can I make all of that conscious and then actually use it for the evolving? Yeah.
Yeah, and that it is going to show up, and we got to coexist and just see it as the guide rather than this toddler screaming in our ear that we have to suppress or be quietened down. It's like putting it in the back seat, and we hear you, we see you.
It needs to be heard. It needs to be heard, because fear that is unheard just is going to take over.
Yes.
Fear that is heard can start to become a guide. As you sit down with your ego and you can start to have a dialogue, and you can say, all right, what are you frightened of right now? What's your biggest fear? And like I always say, and then you can be the adult in the room. You can be the adult in the room. You're more in your power than you've ever been, because you become this kind of self-soothing, self-determining kind of sovereign being that we all talk about right now, where the outside is no longer determining the inside, but the inside is determining the outside.
Yeah, as within, so without, which is perfect, and that is your power.
Yeah,
that's when you take your power back, when you go within, when you take the.
Well, that's when you kind of recognize you could never really lose it in the first place. You just can be under the illusion that you don't have it.
Yes.
That someone else took it and they're withholding it from you.
Yes, I remember one of those stories in the book very well. So yeah, when the critic becomes a guide, so at the end of the book, you give great examples of how to use it, how to create change in your life, and there's great quotes. The other thing I love about the book, because I think we've been talking for an hour now, so creating new outcomes. And I like when the last two chapters, I just want you to sort of run through where just the end, where a whole new world. Like this is like the hero's journey. When we come back, when you become the master of two worlds, this is a whole new world now, living this way, consciously living, which is Sabina Jackson, conscious living. This is how we create a whole new world for ourselves. And as we do it within, and we do it for ourselves, we start seeing our outside change by our perspective. It may look the same to others, but from our perspective, it may look different.
Well, there's that element to it. And then the last chapter is also, I mean, the first 9 are really about the inner and the individual journey and the individual evolution.
Yes.
But we are also in a collective evolution, and I didn't know how poignant that was going to be for when the book was going to be published, because really none of us knew at the beginning of 2019 what the current times were going to look like.
Yeah, 100%. It's really how we read and how we create, manage or navigate the world that we live in now is exactly, it's important. How do we find peace? How do we get our power back when it looks like
and how do I make myself
a
part? How do I make myself a part of the solution, really, is what the final chapter is about. And it's about being part of that that collective evolution that we are currently experiencing. And recognizing that without the individual evolution, we can't really play our part in the collective evolution. So a lot of people right now that, want to help. They want to help wake people up. They want to help make people aware of what's happening. They want to help remind people of their power. But that really takes me back to, and I would have been one of those people in the introduction where I talk about, I would have been somebody who would have been, and I did run around sort of saying to people, wake up, look at what you're doing to yourself. I was constantly reminding of people of their power and completely not living in my own. And so the probably the biggest take-home message of the final chapter, and ideally the whole book, is to recognize that you do set the tone, and so you are a living example. And so without living in your power, how can you remind somebody else? How can you be part of a collective evolution when you haven't really done the work at home?
Yeah.
You be part of a global cleanup, but your own house is a tip. Whereas, and it's not about being perfect before you help the collective. It's about recognizing I'm part of the collective, and everything I do.
When you write about the collective soup, and what we put into it, and then you said there's 3 ways we can add to the collective soup with fear.
Yeah.
We can just
neutralize it,
react it, neutralize it, and the last one is transcend it.
Yeah.
And I guess there's going to be aspects where we
transform it into love. Yeah. I
think that to the final chapter, that really resonated with me, because I can see where I've done all of it.
Yeah.
I can see where I've
and
added
we're going
to the fear,
we are going
and
to
I can
that.
see where I'm like, oh no, I'm not I'm just not dealing with that. And then I can see now that I have got moments now where I can transform it.
Yes.
And only, like you said, you can't transform others. You can transform the space around you, and whoever sees that, well, then that will work. But but that's not why you're doing it.
And recognizing that there is a collective energetic swirl here that we are each part of, and that what we bring to that, which is where I use the analogy of the soup, what we bring to that, others are consuming, and we're consuming. There is an energetic.
Because if we're constantly adding more fear to the soup, it's going to be a pretty toxic soup.
Yeah.
On either side.
We're all going to get more and more sick.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that you set the tone in your own life, but you're also helping to set the tone of the collective.
Yeah. And this is why I think this book really is a book for the now. for the moment, for sure. Like, you know, to go through, everyone's going through some kind of transformation, transition. Everyone's seeing things differently. Everyone's, you know, whether they're at what stage they are, it doesn't matter.
No.
But I think everyone's going through, and I think to then wrap this book up with that collective soup, to know how we can, I do want to just read the last page, but before I do that, I just want to say what I did love about this book is the appendix in the back, because there are lots of exercises throughout the book, which a lot of self-help books or personal development books have. And I don't usually do the exercises through the book because I'm interested in reading it. That's just me.
Yeah.
But
well, that's me too.
And that's great, because then they're in the back, and you've got affirmations with the different chapters. And, you know, me working as a kinesiologist too, I often use these books and test up.
Yeah.
You know, is there something for a client, or, you know, so there's exercises here that you can go back to. And, you know,
well, I wanted to
like, you know, with Louise Hay's book, she's got that
bit in the back
that you can just look at. And I love this. I think that's a great aspect.
Well, I'm someone who also just likes to usually just read through a book. If there's exercises, I very rarely do them, and then I want to go back and do them. But then you have to look through the book,
and you can't remember where they are, or
the
something.
Momentum's lost, the occasion's lost. It feels a little bit. And I wanted it to be something where people could come back and use again and again and redo those. You know, looking at the filing cabinets. I feel stuck here. Okay, let me look at where this could become, where it could be, you know, stem from. So so the last section is called From Knowing to Doing, which, you know, we did cover a little bit before. About, I know. Yeah, but are you doing? And so it just sort of, I wanted that part in the back where you can just go to it at any time, or go to it after you finish reading the book.
Yeah, and I love that you got the affirmations. I'm just looking at one now, which is planting of the seeds. I always have the power. No one outside of me has any power over me, which is very powerful, that one. One to remember. But before we wrap it up, I just wanted to read this last, it's on the end of chapter 10. And it just really, I read it to my husband the other night, because I just said, I've got to read this part too, because it really touched me so may you in your fullness set the tone of your life in such a way that it inspires and encourages all those around you. May you always remember who you are and the perfection of that. Connected, empowered, at peace. I think that is just perfect. I love it. It's just, and that wraps everything up what we were speaking about, the remembering who we are. Remember the perfection in that. The perfection in the journey, the perfection in the remembering, the learning, the even the suffering, the perfection in that. And then to feel connected, empowered, at peace is really what we all want. From that space, we can move forward. From that space, being connected, feeling empowered, and finding peace is, imagine if we could all move forward from that space.
And it's a given. If you are connected and you are empowered, the at peace part is a given.
Just beautiful. I really loved that. It really resonated with me, and that's my hope for the new world, for moving forward, for you know, a gift to give anyone would be that. So thank you, Sabina, for talking.
Thank you.
I really loved it. It just flowed, and like, even though we sort of moved around a bit from each chapter, moved on to the next, and just added to the story and just added to the experience. And because I'm familiar with the work, it just is a perfect compilation. And, you know, not too much. It wasn't too heavy. It was just really easy. I could recommend this to anyone, like people beginning on their journey.
I really intended it to speak to everybody, because
I could give this to anyone beginning on their journey of awakening, or their journey of, or even in that space of that first chapter of just deciding they want things to be different. I could give that person, and the person like me that is, you know, 10 years into their journey. So I loved it. And thank you for this gift, this work that you've put out into the collective soup. And anyway, I wish you all the best with it. Thanks.
My contribution to the soup. Thank you.
So, and then so where can people find the book and where can they find you?
So the book is being sold anywhere where you buy books. So Book Depository, Amazon, Booktopia, anywhere where you normally get your books. And I'm at SabinaJacksonConsciousLiving.com or Sabina Jackson Conscious Living on Instagram.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina.
Thank you.